Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining us for another wonderful edition of the Daz Pro Artist series. Today, we're going to talk about stitches as well as casual snacks. So, good point. What are Funyuns? I guess it's a brand that exists in the US, and they're basically like bags of like snacks, a bit like what we in the UK would call crisps. But I suppose here they fall under the snacks and chips category. I think they're technically a maize snack with fake onion flavor, a bit salty. Quite nice, actually. I believe in the UK and in Europe we would probably just call them onion rings, but Frito-Lay's made a brand out of it, so they're called Funyuns. My friends, my moderators actually today, just wanted to introduce Mr. Brian, aka Zero Calvin. There's also Miss Julia, aka Julia V1, and Mr. Nate, aka Dragonate. So those guys will be my moderators. And if John and I forget any questions in the chat, then we will just go and refer to these wonderful people because they collate these things into a list. But it looks like we have a fairly small live audience, so we can go and accommodate you as we go along. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce my wonderful guest today. It's none other than Mr. John Holding, aka Fugazi. How you doing? But oh, that's not Fugazi, is it? That's uncool. Where's John? That is, well, imagine that is John. It's I think there was something I needed to press and I've forgotten what that was. I could probably do with a dual monitor system here. John will be with you any moment.
Honestly.
So you can't get the staff these days, can you? How about that? That's not bad. Can we see you now? Yes, we can see you now.
Yes,
that is
there
bad.
I am. You can see the side of my head while I look at my other screen because that's where the stream is.
So
Hello.
Sorry, John. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I'm really glad that you could make it again. We talked about 4 weeks ago, the first time on the Daz Plus stream, and it was wonderful to have you. You are such a wealth of knowledge. And I'm sure one of you probably all have one or multiple Fugazi products in your library. You are, of course, the other part of the dynamic duo we'd like to know as the Iron Man / Iron Man 13 and Fugazi. So you are one part of that, which is wonderful.
Yes, indeed.
John and I were
working hard, churning out stuff.
Well, indeed.
Yeah.
And not just on the products front, it is also on your YouTube channel, which is called the 3 Megaverse. If you haven't subscribed to that, I strongly recommend you do. There's wonderful tips on Blender, Marvelous Designer, Substance Painter, and of course Daz Studio on there, as well as Silo and anything else?
Yeah, a little bit of everything, really. Generally speaking, it's whatever I am currently excited about.
Do you know, this is exactly how I do it. What you're excited about, you share that passion. This is exactly how it works, yes. So one such thing, I was intrigued by a tutorial you've made a little while ago about stitches. So stitches is one of those things, if any of you have ever tried to make stitches and add them to garments and bring them into Daz Studio, stitches are always a pain for literally anyone and everyone. And I don't know why they're so difficult. It's just, it's one thing to draw them out in Photoshop, but it's another to make them look handsome on the actual 3D garment. And this is something we got chatting about, and there's so many tips that John can share that I thought, hey, why don't we share this with all of us, with all of you, and turn it into a Daz Plus stream? And that is what we're going to try today.
Well, we're not going to try, we're going to do.
We're going to do even better. How did you, let's just have a quick recap of how you got into Marvelous Designer, when and how.
Well, as you know, I've been working with Iron Man Mike Fame for many years, and way back when this wonderful thing, full of promise, Marvelous Designer came out. So we thought, oh my goodness, Marvelous Designer, this looks amazing. Perhaps we could use it for clothes. which you'd expect. So I started to learn it and had modest sort of results out of it, but it wasn't quite there at the time. So we put it down for a little bit, and then I picked it up for a little bit, and as it became more functional and had a few more, how can I put it, features, we started to actually use it, and that's about it, really. Yeah. The stitches thing is a relatively new thing.
It is, isn't it? I remember that as well. I remember I started in Marvelous Designer 4, so that's the first version I tried. I think Julia tried 3, but none of those had stitches. They came much later. Like all these things, like fancy, I think trims. That was a big feature when they introduced that, like buttons and buckles and those things. That was again, that had a lot of promise. But when it first came out, I was thinking, that's difficult to use.
Yeah, and in my ignorance, and it was ignorance, the original MD only worked in triangles.
Right.
And at the time I thought, well, these are triangles. I can't use triangles. I must have quads. How do I get quads? And I think it was 2 or 3 kind of releases after I first started before it. You could have a quad mesh, and even the quad mesh, even the quad mesh isn't, topologically ideal. So then they've added the retopology options to it, to give it, to give the game or the animation side of things half a chance. Although I have to say I still don't use it because the topology tool is pretty basic, and it could be done elsewhere much easier.
I think this is something that's true. I mean, it's nice that we have that feature, and there are some people who go directly from Marvelous Designer into their target application without anything else, and that's fine. I think if that's a kind of a feature for that audience. But if you're familiar with other 3D tools, then I suppose you could just do these things easier in other applications. I agree.
Although I rarely change the topology, for the simple reason that to get the perfect topology out of it, you would have to completely change the MD mesh, and that cuts you off from doing other things.
Right.
Plus, the amount of effort it would take me to change the topology such that it was anatomically correct. It would just take too long. It's not worth the effort for the minor kind of improvements you get out of it.
Just to reiterate, what's your workflow then? You're kind of the mastermind behind most of the Iron Man / Fugazi packages when it comes to clothing, right? Most of those clothing items.
I make the mesh. So what happens is, we pick some references. I stare hard at the references to kind of try and understand how that piece of clothing is put together.
So important, reference.
Yeah, I mean, if you try without reference, you end up with something that doesn't look like anything. I go back to my old days of 2D drawing, when I was, trying to draw people and faces and that sort of thing. At that point in time, you get taught by your art teachers or books or whatever to draw what you see, and it's drawing what you actually see, not what you think you see.
Very good point.
So, people draw like an oval face, and they draw what they think eyes are and what they think a nose is and what they think lips are, but they don't actually draw what's in front of them. I know what a table looks like. It's got 4 legs and a top. So if I do it without reference, I make a table, and it's a generic table, and it's probably wrong. But it's not the table I'm making. The table I'm making is this one in the reference, and I try very hard to, really look at it and look at the details and think, well, how's that joint put together, or that, or that, or that. And it's the same with clothes, except you try and kind of take it apart in your head and flatten it to a 2D pan. Spot where the seams are, try not to make more pieces than you need to to get it all in there. The difficulty is with references is you get a beautiful reference and it's lovely and it's got this, person. I'd say man or woman, but we rarely do men's clothes.
Except when you're DZ from Renderosity, he makes men's clothing who almost focuses on that, but different topic.
Yeah, but nobody buys my men's clothing, so true. Well, occasionally. So you've got this lovely reference, and you try and make the garment fit exactly as it's fitting the model in the reference, which will never happen because she's completely a different size. She's got cleavage that you can't achieve on a Genesis without morphing her, and so you have to kind of make a few
creative decisions, shall we say, to try and get as well as you can. But that's just things that as long as you realise that it's not going to look identical to the picture, as long as you can get it as close as you can, then that's all good. And that doesn't. I mean, it doesn't help that Genesis is in her A pose is in that pose, especially for sort of tighter skirts, because a lady wearing a tighter skirt, her legs are much closer together. True.
Whereas with Genesis, she's in the A pose, so she's slightly at an angle, shall we say? Yeah.
Fake it till you make it. Yes, absolutely, Brian. Good point. So you look at reference, you recreate it in Marvelous Designer, then does it go straight into Daz Studio, or what's the next step after that?
Well, it goes off to the other end, and they have a look at it and they bring it into Daz, and then start the transfer process. So
that's Mike does that.
Transfer utility, the transfer utility, getting all the JCMs right and all that good stuff, all of which I'm useless at, because I understand the process. It's one of these things that I fully understand how it works. I just can't make it work.
But I mean, that's why you're part of the team. So if Mike takes care of that, that's good to know. But there's nothing in between it. You go Marvelous Designer straight into Daz Studio, and that's
we don't retopologize it.
You don't? Okay.
We don't do anything like that. I do the UVs in MD. So I make it, Mike rigs it, and then the very end of the thing is the texturing.
Okay.
There's no point in texturing before you rig it, because there can be to and fro between us. You might say, well, it's lovely, John. I like how it looks like, because he never likes to give me bad news. Who does? And I'll have it back and just tweak my design a little bit to, make it work a little bit better. So there are things that are quite frustrating, shall we say. You never quite know whether something's going to work. And there are parts of the body where, like under the arms, they're usually quite difficult to deal with. Because if you have a lot of cloth under here, when she lifts her arm, there's going to be some crossover in the zone, and it takes loads with it that you don't want.
Would you in those cases? So I'm just trying to get a mental picture. So you make this in MD, then it goes off to Mike. He rigs it and would say, well, here we have problems in this and that area. You would go back into MD and fix it there.
He may go back into MD and fix it, or he may ask me to do it.
Okay, but you wouldn't. So that's interesting to hear that that you go essentially straight from Marvelous Designer to the rigging stage in Daz Studio, and then once you're done with that, you do materials probably in Substance Painter, I would imagine.
I do them in Substance Painter. If I do them, Mike, I believe, uses his 3D coat because he prefers that.
That's nice. Good to hear. So that's cool. So it's like this interesting to hear, because you could also, like so often in 3D, you could also go and see you have problems and not go back to Marvelous Designer. You could go into Blender, or you could go into ZBrush, or you could do all kinds of stuff. You could have a retopologizing, remeshing in between. And I know people who do that. And refreshing to hear that you don't. That's kind of, that Marvelous Designer is kind of the thing that things come out of. Cool.
Well, we very much try to avoid complication.
Because that is what it is. It's time-consuming complications. You got to be familiar with the other packages. Things could be introduced. So interesting to hear.
Yes, and as I said, we do all of that and all the rigging and setup before we do the texturing, because at any point in that stage, the UV map might change. And if the UV map changes, then your texturing options are limited, shall we say.
Also interesting to hear that you use Marvelous Designer as the UV generator for your clothing projects. Cool.
MD UVs are very good, because if you imagine, while they don't represent the garment as it is, they do represent how the garment would be made, how it would be cut from a piece of cloth. And of course, clothes are textured that way. It's a unique kind of thing, really, or as unique as I know it. It's not a 3D person. 3D people aren't textured flat and then wrapped up, whereas clothes, are cut from pieces of textured material, which then, form a 3D garment. So the fact that you draw out the pattern piece, and the pattern piece is the UV, is perfect.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or as perfect as it can be.
No, good. It's interesting to hear, because there's just so many approaches. It's refreshing to speak about workflow in that way. You can, of course, also, you're kind of a bit of a master in using things not the way they were designed for. So like in the before we started going live, you were showing me how to make a little seat that I found quite interesting with Marvelous Designer as well. It's not strictly speaking a piece of clothing, but it's certainly something that I'd like to see in a 3D scene. So yeah, good to hear you use Marvelous Designer not just for clothing.
No, not at all. In fact, bedclothes, ideal.
Of course.
Any kind of piece of cloth, like a tapestry, or a throw, or a towel.
Curtains, towels, yes, indeed, yeah.
You have curtains for sure. I've even toyed around with my head, and I know how to do it, but I haven't actually done it completely. It's a tent.
A tent? Oh yes, yeah. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Anything from a small one-person tent to a yurt type thing. Yeah, good point. All of those things could be possible. Yeah.
Although I wouldn't do a yurt at scale. The memory overhead would be a nightmare. I'd make a small, one, and then scale it up outside.
Why don't we jump into Marvelous Designer and show us how we would create stitches in Marvelous Designer. So this is what we're going to talk about today, is two options of making stitches. One is the features that we have in Marvelous Designer and the multiple options that we can get stitches out of from Marvelous Designer, and then we're going to have a look afterwards in how to do this with Substance Painter, because that has also an interesting stitching tool. And let's have a look at that. I think I should just switch over. There we go. Perfect. There. I think we can see that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes, thank you, Brian. Good point. Thank you so much. The link that Brian's just posted is to just a Google download. That is one of John's dresses. It's in fact this one that we see right here. That is something John's made, and you can download this. It's a Marvelous Designer garment that you can put on the Genesis 8 figure, and you can literally work along and try this out, what John's going to show us now.
And just as a note, this is like a starter dress. It's just a plain old no-shape dress, which you can cut up, change, and turn into whatever you like.
You could add arms. You could make it longer, shorter.
Yeah, you could add arms, longer, shorter, cut bits off. Make things deeper or shorter, or put frills on, add bits, whatever you like. And rather than make the base over and over again, this is just so that I save myself that time.
I believe in the fashion industry these things are called block patterns, is that right? I think so.
Oh, could be. Not a clue. I'm not in the fashion industry.
It's the thing that you keep starting on and then refine. So they usually are plain and basic, but they are then like exactly what you were just describing. You don't have to reinvent the T-shirt every time. You just go to a block pattern and then you make changes to it.
Okay, so I've got my Genesis in, and I've got my starter dress, and whoops! My fingers are just remembering how to use Marvelous Designer.
Do you know, I just changed the controls. The default ones, they were just confusing me. I switched it to the Maya layout, and that just kind of works better for me.
Yeah, I flip between programs so often that it's all a bit mad. Anyway, so here we have it, and it's fitting nicely. And if I press the space bar to sim it, see it's all there. It's quite pleasant. There's a few things about it that aren't quite right. One thing is these shoulder bits here. I've got a little bit of gape, which is quite normal around the front. So I'm just going to select my front armholes and pop elastic on, but not that much. I'm just going to put it back to 95, and that should tighten that up quite nicely.
Elastic, that's something you apply to like one of the curves, essentially, right? Select the curve, enable
select
elastic.
the curve, yes. And elastic, basically, the ratio is percentage of original size. So if it's 100, it's the same size, which is not a bad thing to do, because if you put it to 100, it will try and maintain its 2D size. Whereas if you have elastic turned off, it will try and stretch it anyway. So I've just set mine to 100, and as you can see, that gape's gone away anyway. I think that my shoulder pieces are a little too far forward, so I'm just going to push that up there. There we go. I'll let that sim.
Oh, I see. So that the seam is not too much forward. It's kind of on top.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it on top. And if I push that up a little bit and I'll pop that down a teeny bit, that should be right. Anyway, you don't have to do that. That's me being a bit perfectionist. So what we want to do is show you stitches. And stitches are ever so easy in MD. In the 2D window, you'll find at the top, we have some top stitch options. So we've got edit, segment, free, and seam line. So I'm going to use my free top stitch, and then I'm going to click on this top point here. I'm going to slide my mouse down, and then when it gets to the end point, I'll click again. And if I zoom right in and change the color of my fabric, which is a not ideal white.
Retina burning white. Oh yeah, there we go.
Yep. So there we have our little stitches. And the default is, how can I put it, very small. So what I generally do then is in the fabric window up here, I'm going to switch that over to top stitch and select this default top stitch. These are the properties of my stitch. So down here we have an offset and a type. We have a shape. Excuse me, I'll just need to cough for a second.
I can always mute you. when I'm thinking you might be finished, I'll put you back on. There we go. Magic mute button.
The magic mute. So we have. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yes, good point. Can you all what are we like audio level wise? Is one of us louder than the other, or is everything pleasant? Because if we're not, we're happy to dig deep and change that. Do let us know.
Yeah. The reason I ask is my big mic was off over one side, and I'm not sure whether I'm using that one or my headset mic.
Dragon,
anyway,
Ascania, and Jeff agree we're all fine. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
So under here we have shape, length, space, thread. We can add a custom OBJ, which Jay and I tried earlier in the week, and it works very well. So first of all, our offset is going to define our distance. So if I put that to 1, for example, you'll see it gets closer to our seam line. So if I pop that at, if I pop that at 2, and then zoom back in again, and
Maybe
try and
make
convince my fingers I'm working.
Maybe make the fabric a little bit darker still, just so that we see the separation between that and the stitch better.
Fabric.
Bohemian called it a sloper. That's actually a very good point. I think sloper, that's kind of the block pattern. Good point. Sloper is the word. Thank you for that.
Right, there we go. So yes, I've just popped that to 2, so that's a little bit closer to the edge. What I do like to do is, because these are very small, and in 3D, very small details, especially from a distance, you don't see. So I have a tendency to exaggerate just a bit. So if I pop this length to say 3.2, I'm going to get longer stitches. And the thread thickness I also increase, so I get a nice, visible stitch. So now, while I may not be able to make out, that they are individual stitches, I can get quite a long way away and I can still actually see them.
It's that extra detail that just tells that it's a real garment rather than there's nothing there, or it's so tiny that you can't see it. That's a good point. So sometimes we just need to make it look good in 3D. It doesn't have to be super realistic. It just needs to look good on the figure. Good point. Yes.
Well, we like realistic, but sometimes realistic is invisible, and as soon as it becomes invisible, then it's kind of counter helpful, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, for example, I'm wearing a t-shirt currently, and you probably can't see any of the stitches.
Good point. Yes.
And in real life, that's perfectly understandable because I'm here. But in 3D, you want to sell. You want to say this is a garment. This is stitched together with something. So you want to add a little bit of extra. What else have we got? We have the space millimeters, which is the distance between the stitches. That's going to put a bit more distance between. I won't go to the custom OBJ. Below that we have texture options. So on the texture itself is actually an image. If I just click on that, we should be able to see, well, I hope you can see that I've got a little stitch here and a stitch here. This is the stitch it's using at the moment, but if I switch this over to a textured stitch rather than an OBJ stitch, it uses that stitch texture in that directory.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's still there. It's still a stitch, and I can still see it from quite a way out. But I've lost all of that horrid geometry, which would be bloating my model and making just about everything in the rigging process hard to do.
Right. So this is kind of one of the major issues that many people have with stitches in Marvelous Designer, that it basically puts, it's not just a cylinder, it's kind of it's a geometric object with a relatively high density, and it puts that for every stitch. It basically adds that as an OBJ onto your export. So you can end up with a dress like that is maybe, I don't know, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 polygons, something like that, without stitches. Could easily be 1 million just with stitches, just because you add stitch lines to the side and to the arms. It's a problem. It looks great on export, but it's not really usable.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
So I remember we were talking in the week. You did the promo for this. With all those stitches, and you had 2 versions. One was like something like 5 million polygons, and the other one
was like maybe like 120,000 tops, but much less. But they're all done with geometry with OBJ. So I didn't use this option. How would this? So when it comes to exporting this, would this be just a flat texture, like basically drawn on the material?
Straight out of MD, yes, but I have a tiny little trick that I use to fake a height map, essentially.
Nice.
So yeah, we'll have a look at that.
We'll have a look at
bit.
that. Cool. But for now,
Yeah.
good to remember this option here. When we switch that over, then this is on the type there, but under information,
Yeah.
under type. When we switch that over from OBJ to texture, OBJ means we get the garment with literally OBJ objects per stitch, and it's all real geometry. Whereas texture means it is drawn on. It's like an overlay, like a little cutout overlay.
Exactly.
Cool.
And you know, I think that Substance has a similar option, but you have more control in here. So if you can do it in here, I would do it. But if you have something where you just can't, you know, you've made the object somewhere else, then you know, Substance has got some options.
Okay.
Yeah. So what else do I want to do? Well, let's pop a stitch on this side as well.
Righty.
I'm going to stitch around the neck. I'm going to stitch everywhere, basically. Just
why not? Just for fun. And you're using the free sewing and the free top stitch tool for that, right?
Yes, yes. The reason I started out with that is because there's more than one segment down this side, and I didn't want to have two. If you do have two segments next to each other that are at a slightly different angle, and you use the segment top stitch, it tends to throw crosses in there at the end of the stitches. Because yeah. Okay, so let's do the back two, because why not?
Nice.
There we go.
Let's make lots of stitches.
So if I zoom out now, we have some stitches, and we can see them from this distance. And if you're doing a nice little portrait kind of render, you know, that's a good distance, and you can still see it. It's not, you know, it's not in your face, and it's not, you know, it's not completely unnatural, and yet, you know, we have exaggerated a bit. I'm just gonna, double click on her, and I'm going to set her offset down to 0.
Oh, the skin offset, that's the distance between the clothing and the actual avatar.
Yeah, and that's where that's just bugging me a little bit. That's going to poke through a bit, but that's only because these have got quite a low particle distance. If I put that to 15 perhaps. There we go, and let it resim. There we go. Now we've got no
perfect. The stitches are killing it. Yes, Yoshi, absolutely. Yeah. It's just that a little bit of extra detail. I got to say,
just
that's just, you know,
teeny bit, teeny tiny little extra to sell the illusion, and you get it. And this is not stitch related, but I'm going to show you anyway. See these seams. You'll get a seam in Substance in Marvelous Designer wherever you've sewn two things together. If there are not two things sewn together, you won't get a seam, and that poses us a little problem, because down here, you know, this looks great. It's got a seam in between, but this doesn't. There is no seam.
It's the seam is essentially emulating the two pieces of the fabric next to one another, going slightly in as they were, because, you know, that's where they're sewn together. But at the bottom we don't have that. It's flat. It's just ending there.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is just create an extra little bit down the bottom there, and then I'm going to sew it up. So on there to there.
See, this is the master at work. It's seamly, Jeff. Exactly.
Master work. This is currently symmetrized. So any change I make on this side will make on that side. I'm not going to make any more changes that need that anymore. And to make it easier, I'm just going to remove linked editing for both of these, because now I can do some sensible things. So with my free sewing tool, I'm just going to sew these up there. Here's another small trick. Once you've sewn something to something, if you select it in 3D space and right click, you can superimpose. So if I superimpose side, you'll see it lines up with what you've sewn it to, which is very handy.
It's super handy. If you were to let it sim from here, it would just go and then just kind of scrunch up the garment, and it's sometimes hilarious but also super annoying. So this is much easier. How did you gauge the correct length for that extra pattern piece? I don't think
I guessed.
You just drew it out.
Yeah, okay. It's a little bit too big, but you can adjust it. The other way of doing it is simply by, in your edit pattern tool, just select these two lines. Whoops, if I have the shift held down, and over in the properties, it will tell you exactly how long it is.
Right, and then you could just create it with those exact dimensions. Okay.
Yeah. But because this isn't actually going to make too much difference, and I'm not actually going to export it, I'm just going to hide it. See, now if I come in close,
look at it.
We've got a nice little stitch and a nice little normal seam.
And the cool thing is you've done this with, so it's literally just in more or less an optical illusion. We have detail on the normal map as such. If you were to do this in a real life garment, you'd have to really take that bottom piece and you'd have to flip it over by 180 degrees and sew it onto the inside, and then that'd be perfect, but it would be problematic once you have it in Daz Studio and you want to add deforce to it or something. That's always
it definitely would. And even if you're going to rig it, having those two polygons very, very close together
is issues.
is nightmarish.
Yes, you just see issues. No, this is great. So, and once again, zoom in again. This was really cool because it literally, just like the stitches, it just sells that illusion of now we actually have a folded under piece. I mean, we don't, but it looks like we have. That's quite nice.
And the other little trick is if you go to edit sewing, and I'm going to do it for all seams, so I'm just going to select everything. You have options. So here we have intensity. So I can jack this intensity up to 50 and you will get a more exaggerated seam. It may be clearer if I get my fingers in line. There we go. So the default is 10, and that's what 10 looks like. If I go to 50, you get a more intense seam, and you can either then change the thickness, say 5.
Oh, that's independent. Okay.
Yeah.
One's literally the width of that seam, and one is how deep it kind of goes down.
If I pop that to 2, and pop that to 20, you'll get a more exaggerated seam.
That is a nice tip. Brian, this is how you make clothing. How's this exciting?
Okay, so I mean, that's all well and good. I'm just going to delete this bottom bit because it's in the way, even though I just wanted to show you could get that normal edge down there. So what I wanted to do, well, this dress is my starter dress and we've put some stitches on it, but we want the shape to be generally that. What else do we want to do with it? Well, one thing we can do is cut it up. And oddly enough, we can use measure tools for that. So at the bottom of the measure tools, which is represented by this little tape measure up here, there is a circumference measure. If you click that and then point in the 3D, you can put down some measures. And, their general purpose is to measure your garment, but that's not their only purpose. If we now go to edit measure, I can select a measure and then click on the disc on the outside and I can move it. So I could rotate that, and I could rotate this one in a similar sort of direction and grab this one and rotate that down that way, and that essentially gives me those measures down there, which is lovely, but still not what I want to do.
If you needed them, yes.
Yeah. So what I can do is, with the measure selected, I can right click, cut and sew.
You can cut and sew measures. I had no idea.
Cut and sew, right click, cut and sew.
How exciting.
And as you can see, my garment has now got lots of different bits on it. If I resim, it will refit, because every time you cut a piece and change the pattern, it recalculates the geometry. That's where you get those little poke throughs at that point. Yeah. So you could leave it at that, or you could say, well, I want to cut it up some more.
Circumference edit tool. Is that cool, huh? Right, Brian? I thought so too.
So we could still come in and edit our measures. Make sure you get the edit measure garment, not the edit measure avatar.
Oh, good point. So there's a couple. I've never really looked into measure tools, to be brutally honest. So, I mean, I had always assumed that they would be there, but since I'm not a clothing manufacturer in real life, I've never really, not a tailor, I thought, well, who, is that important? Yeah. Now that
it's quite useful, because you can get the, you can find out from the avatar measures how big your avatar is, how big Genesis is.
That's a good point. Yes.
Once you know that her bust is this particular, dimension, I don't know off the top of my head, oddly enough. You can make a garment that will fit that.
It'll be helpful,
or
if
at least
draw
be
out,
close.
That's right. Like if you draw out the pattern pieces, and you kind of know, well, if I wanted to have a trouser leg that fits the size of the Genesis legs, you measure the leg, and then you go, oh, now I know how long that needs to be. Yeah, that makes sense. But this is awesome. This brings so much variation into a relatively simple garment, because now, of course, you add different materials to certain pieces, and all of a sudden you've got a fashion masterpiece within a couple of seconds. So
indeed.
Very cool.
And once you've got it cut up, as you say, you've got all your different cut pieces. I didn't cut one. It's this one, I think. Cut. There we go. Now we've got the ability to put more than one fabric on. So if I go back to my fabric window, I can copy my original fabric, change the color.
Copy, what they mean by that is duplicate, really, right? I think
they do mean duplicate, yes.
Color blocking. So thank you for your tips, Bohemian. I really appreciate that. It sounds a bit like you're in the fashion industry. You're working as a pattern maker, a fashion designer. Very good, very good. I love listening to all these new terms. I think Marvelous Design is a fascinating tool, and I know so little about it. I really appreciate all these little tips. Much nice.
So the easiest way to sort of do these all in one go is to pick the bits you want to make a different color, and then on the fabric panel there's this little down button here that will apply it to all of those pattern pieces.
There's your answer, Tracy. Exactly. And then you can have as many materials as you like, and it was extremely easy to do that. I love that. I mean, creating pattern pieces like that from scratch would be pretty much a nightmare, but doing it while the dress is in one shape, you could probably even take one out if you wanted to, like the one in the middle there.
Exactly.
Take the triangle out, and then you've got this.
That was my next kind of thing. I was just going to take these bottom bits off, and there we go.
Seriously cool.
I could put another couple of cuts up the top to make it a bit more balanced, I guess. But yeah, there you go. I mean, you could be really creative and put some real kind of jags on the bottom, make it, really ragged. But this isn't about cutting up dresses and making them, look
this
lovely.
Is just all icing on the cake, isn't it? It's about stitching. Totally forgot about this. NFT, Brian says.
So I'm going to use the segment top stitch now because I can. Segment top stitch, not edit top stitch.
So segment, that's just basically click on one line and it does the whole line, whereas the free, you have to basically select an arbitrary start point and an end point.
Yes, indeed.
Very cool, John. This is great stuff.
There we go. And we just go down our model. I'm doing both sides, More sensible people will probably only do one side because that's enough.
Like Chris always says, clever me would have done that. Clever me stayed at home today. It's just you're only getting me.
Well, I always overdo things a bit. If you're going to sell it with stitching, put a lot of stitching in. That's my
Good point, yes. And we are here for the
general
stitchings.
thought of
Good
it.
point.
And we are here for the stitching.
John, just so while we're talking about multiple stitches and multiple types of fabric as well, the top stitch, they work the same way, right? I mean, you have, when you were playing with the current top stitch type, like the width and the thickness and all that, you can also duplicate that and assign a different type of top stitch to different types of the garments, right?
You can indeed. So if I go to the top stitch panel, I can grab this top stitch and press copy again.
/ duplicate.
Yeah. And say for the color, I want it a different color. Say for the red portion, I want it to be yellow stitching. So what I would need to do then is in edit top stitch, on each of my red pieces, we wouldn't have to do them all at the same time. We can change it from default top stitch to our copy. And once I flip it over to the copy, it should, I think I'm looking at the back of the dress.
Yeah, good point. Yes, there it is. That's
there
yellow.
It is. So now we have the yellow. So I can continue to do that.
Hours of fun.
This.
Hours of fun.
Select all with same property. No, never mind. So if I
that sounds interesting.
Sorry, my brain's gone. Yeah. So I could go around and do different kinds of stitches on all of my red pieces, and I can even go into here and say, well, I don't want this stitch anymore on this one. I want a zigzag stitch.
Like a totally different shape. Yeah, like yes, look at that.
So now I've got the zigzag instead of the the straight stitch, and that will have done that for everything that I've got that particular top stitch assigned to.
Some good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Yes, fingers crossed. Here we go. It's not yellow anymore, but that's because I changed the stitch type.
Yeah.
But whatever you want to do, essentially.
Nice. It's like once you understand the principle, it kind of it dawns on you. Oh, okay, so that's how Marvelous Designer thinks about this: duplicating materials, duplicating stitches, and then just select, apply. It kind of makes sense. It makes sense.
It does in some way, shape, or form. And I think we've covered most of stitching.
How to make stitches. Yep, indeed.
Then I think I've missed one there.
The big thing for us Daz Studio users then is, of course, well, that's all great if it works inside Daz Studio, but how do we make this come across nicely in Daz Studio so that we see some of that goodness appear in Daz Studio?
Well, there's a few things yet.
Good point.
To look at. So first of all, if I select all of my top stitches by just dragging my box there, there are a few options here. We've got a start and an end. We have curved, right angled, and our Z offset. Now the Z offset, I believe, is the offset above the cloth. Oddly enough, you may want it offset above the cloth if it's not quite working. Or you might want to inset it even more. So it starts at 0.13. So you can go lower if you want.
So Z, I suppose they mean Z above the normals, I suppose, because
I think
it's a little crazy to think about. So it can't be the global; it has to be local, and it has to be.
It has to be local.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is that on each of these top stitches, down the bottom, we have a few options. So if I zoom in a bit, I think I've assigned the wrong thing to the wrong thing somewhere.
I might have to zoom in there just a little bit on the bottom portion because I think our faces are in the way, but I'll keep a close eye on it.
Yeah. I don't know what I've done. I've done something stupid. I think I might just have to use my back button. I think I may have applied all the same. Yeah, there it is. I pressed a button that I shouldn't have. I just applied all of the copy to all of the stitches, and that's not what I wanted to do.
Oh.
So on the default top stitch, for example, we've got a number of lines. So if you have a look down here, I could up this to 3, and now I get 3 lines of stitches instead of just the 1.
Yes, that is nice.
Yep. Or I could have 2. 2 seems a bit more sensible. And we got the space here. If I increase that to say 5, I'll get more of a space between those stitch lines.
Oh, that is an easy way to vary that. Make it look a bit interesting.
2 and 0.6. There we go. That sells a bit more.
Yes, lots of stitches. I like it.
Lots of stitches. There we go. Okay, so if we want to actually get this out of here and into something else, namely Daz in our case, it needs to be exported. Now, the first thing we need to do to export it is to actually create our UV map. And the easiest way to do that is just to rearrange your pattern pieces just so there's a little bit of a gap between them in the 2D view.
Funny, fascinating that this is the way you do that. That's good to see.
Well,
that doesn't actually start in the UV editor. So I would go straight to the UV editor and then complain that things are, messed up. So it's kind of good to see that actually you start fixing it elsewhere, and then it kind of is much easier to deal with in the UV editor.
It's much easier to do like this than it is to do in the other way. So now I've got a nice space between my things, and I'm roughly in a square. I can go to my UV editor.
As Cass, sorry to stop you there, X201 makes a great point. Save your work. Save the project.
No, not going to be bullied. Jay gets bullied in saving things. I'm a daredevil.
This is how you deal with that. John, this is awesome. No, I refuse to save. That's the spirit. I love it.
Just for you, I will save as project.
Thank you.
Because sod's law, the next thing I do will probably crash it.
I'm going to remember
we'll have
that.
To start again.
I refuse to be bullied into saving. That's going to be great. I'm looking forward to telling Jeremy
I know it's good for me, but I refuse. There we go, all saved. Okay, so now I've come in here, you'll see, and this is quite a neat version. I've got my 2 dresses with everything really close together next to it. If you've got a lot of pattern pieces, you might find you don't see them all because they're stacked under each other and all over the place. So I rearrange it in the 2D view first. Then in here, without selecting anything, to right click and reset to 2D arrangement.
And then it mirrors what you've the hard work you've put in the pattern editor.
And it's easier to do in the pattern editor because the patterns are mostly separated. In here, they could be stacked upon one another.
Right.
Yeah.
That's such
a
good tip.
Reset it in here and then do it, but I just find it's easier to do it.
Do you know? So I'll tell you what I do, and why that's actually bad. What I do, because I'm just banging my head against the wall and trying for something to fall out that makes sense. So I look at the UV editor and Marvelous Designer. I think, well, they should really go and implement a better.
They should fix this.
So they just fix this. They refuse. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to go and export the whole thing out, let Blender pack the UV islands, and be done with that. And while that is awesome and super efficient for the UVs, it is of course terrible for materials that I may have set up here and that I then have to redo in Substance Painter or in wherever. And that's a problem because the moment you mess with the UVs away from Marvelous Designer, you need to then recreate the materials because you've got new UV, so all the materials you've had in here are no longer usable. Whereas doing it your way, you can actually use Substance materials directly inside Marvelous Designer, bake maps out directly from Marvelous Designer, save yourself all that headache and hassle, have a happier life. So very cool, very cool.
And just to demonstrate that, I don't know what everybody thinks. Would you like to see me using Substance materials from Marvelous Designer to get a texture out of this that then Jay can set up in Daz Studio.
That is actually a great idea. I'd love to see that. So John's not saying let's go into Substance Painter. Not yet. We'll do that at the end. He's saying let's use Substance materials, apply them in Marvelous Designer, bake the maps out from Marvelous Designer, and essentially just, use from Marvelous Designer directly into Daz Studio. I'd be up for that.
Yep.
And hello, Christina. Good to see you.
Christina. Okay, so before I do that, I'm just going to select these and pack them. I may repack them a little later because I have some thoughts and notes on material sizes, etc. So they're packed now anyway, and that's a half decent UV. I can see it. It's sensible. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the 2D window, and then I'm going to hide that because I don't need to see it. So back to our fabrics. So I've got 1 and 2. If I name this red, no, that's not red. Black. It's my left hand, right hand, can't tell. So we've got black and red, and we have a substance folder now in Marvelous Designer, which comes with some default substances, which on first look terrible.
It's just it's the previews. They really haven't chosen great previews, I've got to say. Yes,
they haven't. No, but I think the preview is almost no. It is generated by Marvelous Designer, not by Substance. So say we want this to be a leathery kind of dress. We've got this Tauriel or Tyrolean leather natural worn down here, which, as we say, has a terrible thumbnail. I can drag and drop that onto my black material and it will rename it, but it will apply that material to it. And that's all very well. But if I select it, I've got some options down here. So under custom properties, I can, for example, change the overall color. So I want a darker, closer to black overall color. There we go. Now I have kind of a cracked black leather there. If I slide a little further down, we've got our sort of texture colors, and I can adjust those a little bit, perhaps take some of the saturation out and make it a little darker.
Just in case you're confused by this, these properties that John's adjusting, they come with the substance materials. So this is not every substance material has exactly these options. It kind of depends on the material, how that's created, what options you have. So sometimes you can change the color, sometimes you can change multiple colors if the material has like in our case it has a top material and it's got the scratches, and there would be kind of 2 types of colors. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. So those are things that I found greatly confusing in the beginning, that some materials behave totally different than others. I thought, well, if it's a shader, shouldn't it follow the rules of that shader? But that's not how substance materials work.
No. So we've got our second scratch color here, so I'm going to make that really pale. And there we go. So now we have kind of a black leather section. We could make the red leather, or we could make it a completely different material.
Oh yeah, maybe that's a cool idea. Make it something like a polyester, not so much a cotton, but something like a polyester.
Yeah, we go for a good old polyester, lime green, obviously.
Great color, yeah, no, good.
What other color would you make it? So we could drag that onto there. And
velvet.
As says,
Tracy says velvet.
Has velvet. Really? Have we got a velvet?
Do we have it?
We don't, but or rather we don't in the substances, but there is a velvet option in the standard materials.
Let's stick with this one. Let's stick with substance materials for now. Sorry, Tracy.
So as Jay says, this has got a different set of options. So if I open the custom properties, you see this is much more simple. We've got a color, which we want some sort of darkish red, I imagine. We have variation luma, we have roughness and metallic. We also have channels. So you'll notice that there's some transparency in this.
Oh, indeed there is.
So if I open up the channels, we could take that transparency out simply by disabling the channel.
Ah.
And then we have it like that.
Do you know, I kind of like the transparency, I've got to say.
Yeah, well, I could turn it back on again.
Pop it back on. I like it. Is
Yep.
there a way to change the kind of the size of that?
Of course.
Of course
So
there
if
is.
I collapse up the channels, we can look at transforms. So these are all basically, if you think of it as a square image, they've decided that the scale should be 150 millimeters by 150 millimeters. That's fine, but it's too big in this case. So if I click the lock aspect ratio down here, then I can change one of these to 75 and it will halve the size.
Makes it smaller.
Makes it smaller, yeah. And if I went down to 37.25, 2 at least, that will take it down again. So yes, you always have options.
Interesting. So now it's almost like lace. I like it. Now it's almost like lace.
Indeed. Good job I've got her modesty drawn on underwear.
Good stuff.
What else have we got? We have techie parameters. This generally works with normal intensity, your DirectX format. That's interesting.
Oh, they have
DirectX
that as well.
format, we want to be OpenGL
we
we're going to Daz Studio.
And we also
because
that's interesting. So do we need to set that on the other material as well?
If that has it post? Yes. If it has the option. They don't always have them, but yes, we do.
Nice one. Look at
so that saves us having to take it out into another application and figuring out which one the green channel, and then figuring out whether to flip it vertically or horizontally. Or
this is one thing that I got to say. I mean, I really give them credit for the amount of features they put in there. I mean, yes, they are hidden sometimes, and you really need to know your stuff, but it is all there, isn't it, in Marvelous Designer? It's quite frighteningly good, I have to say.
Yes.
This is very cool. And this
Although
is extremely
in fairness
techy
to Substance, this is a Substance option. It's not a Marvelous Designer thing, really.
True, but Marvelous Designer would have gone ahead and exposed those options for us to have a fiddle with, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know, just while we're talking about Substance options, so I also see a resolution option there. Do we need to crank that up from 1024 to something larger?
We can, but this is our preview option.
Oh, I see.
But we can go up, to a higher resolution.
But that is just a preview, so that is not something that's acknowledged when we export the maps. Is that right?
I don't believe so. You see, this looks pretty awful here, but if I, say, take that to 2048, we get a much finer map now.
Gotcha.
And similarly, does polyester? Yes, that does too. And we can go to 2048 on that too.
Abnormal maps, Brian. That's hilarious. And thank you for Fugazi's link. Yes, check out his amazing, hugely large portfolio on the Daz store.
Oh, ridiculous.
It's unbelievable. Celebrating 2,000 products.
2,000?
I don't know. I've not counted them.
Over the years, I imagine so.
How long have you been a vendor? How long? Do you remember the first product you've released on the Daz store?
I don't remember the first one I did on the Daz store. I think I remember the first one I did on the Rendo store.
Oh, of course, you're on Rendo too. My goodness.
Yeah, well, we started there.
Is that same name? Fugazi 19?
Fugazi, yeah.
68?
Yep. I haven't released an awful lot on there recently, but I think my first product was a video showing how to conform clothes in Poser.
Oh.
Which would be entirely useless to just about anyone and everyone now. Except the Poser users, of course. Now they've released a new version, which I haven't looked at.
Alrighty, so Substance options, stitch options, this is great.
Yes, and some of these are better than others. I particularly like the stylized rib knit. I think that does a really nice job. Not really suitable for this particular dress. And the fleck was quite nice, this tartan kind of thing. And you have all sorts of options on them. And as with most substances, there are things to tweak with and mess about with.
How about materials that you have in your kind of personal collection that are not part of the Marvelous Designer? Can you use those as well? I would imagine.
You can. If you go into your if you go into Substance and you've got all of your
Assets, or like
assets
materials
here,
in the asset browser.
We have some fabrics here somewhere. We have a leather soft grain. That's quite nice. So if I right click on that, I can show in folder. Whoops, right click, show in Explorer. That's it. And providing it's an SBSAR, which is the Substance Archive, I can copy that. And then in here, I can right click here and copy the path.
Oh.
And then I can open that in my Explorer. Here's one I did earlier, for example, and paste that in. So that's pasted in there.
Now we have it in there.
Yeah. Now, if I go back to MD and just switch directories over, so it refreshes.
Or use the refresh button at the top there.
I could use the refresh button, but that's what normal people do.
That's what normal people do.
Yes, and I'm clearly not. So here it is, soft grain leather.
And there we have it. Cool. Okay, so we can do that too. Excellent.
Yep. So I could drag that up there. There it is. That's quite a nice leather for a suede kind of dress. We can change our proportions because that's too chunky, I think. Let's halve it. That's a bit more grainy. And custom properties, obviously I don't want
like
that colour.
Light brown isn't our colour.
It's not what I was going for. There we go. Now we have
leather and
kind
lace.
Of leather.
Cool.
Yep.
I like it.
That's quite a nice thing. If I pop that to 2048, as you say, that will tidy up and clear up a little bit more. We should have some techie parameters. We have normal intensity, so we can up the normal intensity.
Oh yeah,
this
one
that
up.
Doesn't
That's good.
appear to have the normal type, which is slightly annoying, but I suspect there's not much of a normal on it.
I do have to admit I like the cracked leather that we got from Marvelous Designer from before.
Yep. Well, let's see how long it takes to undo it. There we go.
Yes, well done.
I'm happy enough with that, except to say it's a bit shiny for my liking.
Right. Yes, I agree.
So we've got height, normal, contrast. It must be under custom. Roughness. Here we are.
There we go.
Let's put that up to 0.6.
Make it rough like. Nice. Now it's more like a leather rather than a.
It's more like a worn leather than a
polished
shoes leather. I think perhaps it's a little too. So let's take it to 0.5. Yeah, we're getting a little bit more, glancing angle.
This is something I kind of like the idea that you can probably adjust that in Daz Studio when we've got the materials there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. Let's sim to get rid of the poke. And there we pretty much have it.
With stitches too.
With stitches. Although, and it's bugging me, I noticed I missed one. So let's go back to our split window.
John the perfectionist. This is how I work. I then go and say it's basically done, but now I'm going to spend 2 hours trying to figure out the one thing that I think might be in there.
Yeah.
So funny.
It's the wrong stitch, but I don't care. It is what it is. So there we have it.
Let's see how we can not only export the maps out, but also see if we can, now because we're not using the stitches as OBJs, we're using them as textures. How do we get them to show up with a little bit of height in another application?
Okay, so what we need to do, first of all, is export. And I'm just making sure these are both set to texture first.
Very good.
And that I've got my UV correct. So we have a little bit of a consideration to make here. We have 2 zones, and that's all well and good, but it's reducing the amount of space, texture space, that we've got to work in. And because we're working with stitches, which are a very small detail, maximizing our texture space is, I would say, important.
Agreed. We all agree on that?
Yeah. So what I want from this is 2 maps. And for that, what I can do is select all of one type. And then with my arrow key, I'll move to the right.
No way.
Move over
whoa.
to this additional UDIN tile.
So just arrow keys, left, right, that's it?
Left, right, yeah. And with that done, because that in itself won't give me much in the way of extra space, I'm just going to squeeze these up a bit.
And this is where I'd like to see that additional packing mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, that's what's missing. But when I pack it again, it's going to pack it in the original. But I'll just press the right button and it will go back again.
Do you know, just as this kind of an aside here, if you were to decide, like a packing mechanism would potentially decide to rotate the bottom pieces around, for example, would that have an effect on the grain on the material?
Well, it wouldn't if you're using your map directly out of Marvelous Designer, because Marvelous Designer already takes care of that.
Cool. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
This is one of those things.
If you were then going to repaint it outside, you'd probably want them oriented in the same direction.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's probably enough. That will get me a bit of extra space. There we go. Okay, so now I'm all ready to go. Up here, we have a bank textures option. And if I click that, it will ask me for a save path. And I will go and find my save path. I know it's around, there it is. And we'll call it, what do we call it?
Start address. Even stitches, good point. Stitch demo. Stitch demo, yeah.
I think I've missed at least one T down there, possibly. I think I have a stitch address at the moment.
That's the demo.
Which may be appropriate. Yeah, so give it a name and you save. I want all UDIM tiles, this tile and this tile, and it will break those tiles out as different images. So diffuse, metalness, normal, roughness, opacity, if you want your opacity for that.
Did we have metalness? Do we have metalness?
Possibly not, although I don't know whether the leather uses it. You'll notice now I've gone into a rendered mode here. It's all much shinier. It may be from metalness, it may not be.
We'll have a look at it.
Yeah, we'll have a look at the map and delete it if we don't need it, essentially. And then we'll save that.
It's a stitch up, Gov. It's a stitch up.
Yeah. The only thing I didn't mention there, you'll notice I've done these at 4096. I've done them at 4096 because my figure is at 4096. And to expect to get the same detail in the dress as I do out of the figure, I'm going to need the maps more or less the same in terms of their, size. To get a 2048 dress to look like it matches a 4096 figure, I think is probably a bit of hard work.
Ain't going to happen, Governor. Yeah. Good point.
I mean, it's fine if it's miles off in the distance, and you're not going to see it. But if it's your key figure and it's close to you, you want to have some detail.
Gotcha, yeah. Good idea.
Okay, so that's exported those. But now what I want to do,
that's a little bit of an awkward dialogue, isn't it? You say export and then the dialogue doesn't actually close. It just kind of lingers around.
And it only gives you a cancel option. I don't want to cancel it. I do want to close it, but I don't want to cancel it.
Yeah, bizarre, isn't it? Yeah. But hey, it's okay. We forgive you, Marvelous Designer.
It's not the only program I have that does that. So now What I'm not going to get out of those maps is any sort of stitch normal.
Right, because so currently we essentially, if you zoom into the maps, we see our stitches are essentially drawn on to the map. So we get them as 2D detail as a drawn on thing, but we have no height detail. Since we have no geometry, we have nothing like that currently.
Indeed. I'm just going to delete these out because they're confusing issues at the moment. So here's the oops, let's go extra large. So here's our diffuse. We've got our metalness, which has got nothing on them, so let's get rid of it. It's just so it doesn't confuse us. We have our opacity, and we've got our roughnesses. If I look at the diffuse, or the normal rather, you'll see it's got the edges on there, and it's got some normal from the underlying material, but there's no stitch normal on there.
Indeed.
So what we can do to try and help with that is change our original fabrics. So if I go to our fabric.
Is this a moment where we should maybe potentially save out one version before we make changes to the material, just in case we want to come back to it?
Oh, if you'd like.
Don't want to bully you into anything or not, but...
Help, I'm being repressed. Come and see the violence inherent in the system. Right, so select all your bits. File, export, OBJ selected. I'm going to put it into my demo directory, and it's called the stitch dress. And it will save that.
We have come full circle, Brian. It's hilarious. I like it.
Brian has nagged you enough. Now you nag other people. So all patterns, regardless of whether you said selected or otherwise, you always leave this selected. Single object and welded, thin, unified UVs. I don't want to export any maps because I've already done it. Scale is millimeters because that's Daz's scale.
Actually, let's change that to centimeters. That's Daz's scale.
Oh, what did I think it was millimeters? My brain has obviously gone fried.
Too many applications.
Too many applications, not enough sleep. XYZ is fine, and then we'll click OK.
That's the OBJ. Got the materials, got the OBJs. Cool.
Yes. Okay, so now I want to reset these. So if I select my Tyrolean leather, we can change it back to a PBR material, and we could do the same for the honeycomb. So these have now gone back to default. Now I need these to be black because black is, well actually I need it to be mid-grey. Let's make it black. Because I want a black and white map essentially. And then my stitches, wherever my top stitch has gone, I want to make sure that these are nice and white. So where's the material gone?
Yes. Material, is this just collapsed?
There it is, I've collapsed it up. So just making sure that these are white, they are white, that's fine. And that's white too. So now I have a height map, essentially, for my stitches. All we need to do is export it out.
This is a very, very clever idea, John. I have to say, that is a very, very clever idea to just...
Sometimes, I have them.
I mean,
sometimes.
What's clever about this is that it's not so much that the program is lacking an option to give us what we want. We just fiddle a little bit, and then the program will generate what we need. It's just,
yes.
You know, so you just make the material black. So basically, save it as a second project now, just to get this detail out. Black is where the garment is, and white is where the stitches would be, and that'll be essentially a height map. We add that to the shader, and that is going to give us that little up or down, whatever we want. Something. Probably up. Very cool. Yes. Very clever.
The other option is to mix it in with the normal.
Oh, Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, that sounds next level stuff. Let's see how we do that.
Okay, so I need to go back to my UV editor, and this time I want to export again, but this time I only want the diffuse map. Yep.
Just the diffuse?
I need just the diffuse, and this time I'm going to put it into a subfolder called height, because if I export now, it will just overwrite these.
Of course, yes, that makes sense.
Yep. I'm just going to call it height, so that it really differentiates. And it saves that.
Just the diffuse
save.
Tiles. Cool.
And then I close.
Close the unauto closing dialog.
Yes, and then I've got my height maps here.
Let's take a look. So exactly what we expect: black for nothing, white for stitches.
Yes. Okay.
Hmm.
So you will need Substance Painter for this.
So this is this additional step that you were saying you could blend it in with the normals.
Yep. So let's start a new project. I'm going to do it at 4096.
Oh wow.
Well, I've already changed my mind before you said, "Oh wow." I'll upscale it later. So there we go. We've got our object. I need the UDIM tiling, UV tile workflow, and then I can click OK. This project has been no.
Even though that does look good, I hope we have time to have a look at that a little bit later.
Yeah. So there we go. As you can see, this is a very tight-fitting dress. You can almost see, you know.
You can see her belly button.
See her belly button and ribs and all sorts. So to bring the images in is very straightforward. If I select all of our images here, I can drag and drop those into the library, and it will create this dialog. Now, if I select everything and change it all to texture, and I want to do this to the current session and import, and that's going to import them in. And as you can see, because their UDIM naming convention is correct, it stacked them into groups of 4. So I've got my stitch dress diffuse.
Oh, that's what the number 2 means.
Both tiles in there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So let's set up this texture, and then I'll bring in the other one. So we have base color, and this is so base color. It knows which tile it's looking at, so it's put it in the right place. Same with the normal map. We have an opacity map.
Put that in there.
We have our roughness map.
A little bit of roughness going on.
There we go. I'm going to turn off not opacity but emission.
And metals, I suppose.
I'm going to leave height on. Yeah, metal's not necessary, is it? Okay, so now I'm going to copy this and select my other material and paste it in. And by the magic of UDIMs, it knows exactly what to do.
Man, good stuff.
Now, what about the height maps I hear you say? If I go and find my height maps, I can drag both of these in, set them to textures, and then current session and import. Now we get a new set, and we can drag these into our height option. So if I drag that in there, you'll see immediately I have height.
Check it out.
And if I, whoops, didn't mean to do that. No, I really didn't mean to do that. If I select my other material, I can drag and drop that on there, and now I have height. And that looks quite different, I think, to without height, which I can see by simply turning it off and on.
I don't actually see the stitches as such. Were they there? I know there must be. I mean, in regards to the color of the stitches.
Texture. Yeah, they're there, look.
Yeah, on the right, on the red, I can see it. Yeah, on the brown, it's
Yep.
it's almost not noticeable, but I can see it. Oh, it's also because we're looking at it not in like 2K or 4K. We're looking at it at a
Yeah,
low.
we're
Yeah,
looking
okay,
at
that's
a
perfect. Then. Don't
lower
worry, that's
kind.
cool. That's cool.
Yep. Where is it? There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, it does obscure it a little bit because of the shading and because we're not, we haven't got a really high res texture. And that's something I wanted to show in that, we can come in here at any time and change our project to 4096.
Yes, and then we'll see a much clearer preview.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's cool.
And you'll see that really tied it up. But I haven't done it for the Trillion. So if I do it for Trillion as well, that will really tidy up too.
I like it. I like it.
Okay. Now here's the clever bit.
Okay.
At the moment, if we look at the normal map, you won't see those stitches.
We only have the seam indent, but we don't have the stitches as a normal. They're only coming in from the height map.
They're only coming in from the height. However, if I go to File, Export Textures, and pick my PBR metallic roughness, I have one with the OpenGL. So we need the OpenGL for
Daz Studio.
Daz Studio. I don't like Dilation Infinite. Diffusion. There we go. I can select each of my materials and then deselect what I don't want. So I only want the normal.
Okay. Interesting. I have no idea what's going to happen next, but that's part of the fun.
Sadly, nor do I. And that's a bit scary. I'm afraid that it's going to make a liar of me, which I would not be happy about. So I'll pop them in there. Okay, so because of my output template, which is this OpenGL one, it is doing a calculated normal wherever the normal's gone. There it is. So this blue square here corresponds to this normal OpenGL down here, which is this little blue square. And that's a calculated map. It will not show in Substance until it's export, because it's constantly on a calculate. So providing it's not going to make a fibber of me, we should be able to see that now when I open this up.
Okay.
We've got our calculated normal stitches.
Now, of course, so what happened was that it took the regular normal that we provided, it used the height map that we provided, and upon export, it gave us a new normal that calculated the height information into the normals that we're now baking out, and this is what we're seeing. Oh, interesting. There we go. So that is now a normal map I could use in a different application like Daz Studio and use as my main normal map, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. If I just pop that in there, because I think now...
Mind blown, how exciting.
That all of this is ready for your Daz Touch.
Do you know, could you export the normals again and just turn down the height a little bit? Because I find that it's a little bit strong in the dress. It's also an interesting one how to see how to actually do that. So since this information is isolated from everything else, we can now just take the height map and just drop it down. Even though we provided a map, we can just go and nudge it down a tad.
So in the layer, up here we have base color currently, but we have all of our channels. And I can go in there and say, actually, I only want this height at 50%.
Exactly.
Yep. And similarly, I'd need to do that on the Trillion as well. There we go. Both 51, which is as close as I'm going to get it probably.
Did we actually see a change? I didn't actually quite see that change.
No? Okay.
Maybe I'm blind though. That could well be.
Well, it may be that you won't see the change in here.
Ah, right. Right, yes.
Because it's not that much of a change. But the best way to do it, I find, is to go to the channel.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Probably to the other one.
So this is at 50%. I can see it. Look.
Oh, right, yes, I can see it, yes. And you crank it up.
That's the wrong one entirely. I need to be on this one. There we go. So if I make this 100%, you'll see it comes in much stronger. I mean, it's not that, strong in the first place, which is odd. But hey, let's try 50.
Let's investigate.
Let's investigate, yeah. On stream, where we ought to be investigating. There we go. So now I've done that, and then if I go and export my textures again, should have all the same options that I did last time. So it's only the normal. It's in the same directory, and I can just export again. It will have a quick calculate. I'll open the directory again, and it's still a little strong. I don't think it's quite as strong. It's possible I would have to investigate on how to really take those down.
But it's, hey, this is good food for thought. I mean, I had never even thought about getting normal maps out of that. I mean, like, this is really good to see, because I would have thought, hey, imagine I had a normal and then I had a different height. How do I mix one with the other? How would I even do that? So this is how you do that. This is great. Getting the parameters right is just a matter of playing around. So let's take that and see what that looks like inside Daz Studio. I like it.
We've got the other one here.
Does that look different? I think so. I think this looks actually a bit harsher. Yeah.
I think it does. So let me go and get the other ones.
Cool. Thanks, John. Very nice. Tracy, yeah, good point. You prefer to have too much detail, and then you can it's easy to take it down in Daz Studio, no problem at all. And also gives you a little bit more wiggle room. But if it's not strong enough to begin with, then we have a problem. You're absolutely right, yes.
Yeah, it's true. The problem is we don't just have the stitched normal detail. There's normal detail from the fabrics in there as well.
True, yes.
If you turn it down too far, you'll lose that. But yes, I get the point.
You could even, this is something I'm going to investigate this myself, because this is one of those things you just have to play around with and see what your workflow is. Like, I would like to see what happens if you use the height map that you've exported for the stitches and apply that directly as a bump map on top of the normal map inside Daz Studio. Just something, see what that looks like. Might look great, might not look good, but it's one of those things to try out. Then you have them separated on two different channels.
Now the question is, how am I going to send this to you?
Well, we tried this last time with Zoom, didn't we? Try that again. I don't remember how we did it. Yes, where's the chat?
There's the chat.
You found the chat. Where do I need to find?
There we go. It's uploading at the moment.
Okay.
It's 53 meg, so it might take a moment or two. So I would suggest, if anybody needs a toilet break or coffee or needs to eat some Funyuns, or if Julia would like to do a small comedy set in between, that would be awesome. No, Julia?
Thanks for the dress, I'll say, first of all. And I'll put a little smiley face in there. Perfect. And this is where that should appear, right?
Yes. If you can see my screen currently, you should be able to see that it's about 90% set so far.
How exciting. So do you know what? I might go just go over to my screen then. In fact, just trying to figure out which buttons to press. There we go. This is my screen now, on which I have Marvelous Designer open, just in case we needed that, but I guess we don't. So I'll go and get Daz Studio ready to get in action.
Unless you want to do your own interpretive cutting up of the dress.
I could do it all again, see if I can do it in the next 25 minutes. I'll take your dress and we'll see how to apply the maps in Daz Studio. And if we do have time at the end, we also want to have a look at the exciting ways in which we can create stitches inside Substance Painter. That's another thing.
Yes.
So let me do the maps in Daz Studio, and we'll come back to this.
It's sent now. I don't know if you noticed.
Okay, I haven't. Just looking at different computers,
I know. It's too many computers, not enough desk space. The
amount of, there it is, perfect. So I go and save that into, well, ideally I can save that from that PC, from my streaming PC, which is what we're looking at. I'm going to put that directly in my other PC, I think, under network. Yes, this is my real PC. This is my streaming PC. This is Julia's PC. Because, there's just so much going on. And where am I going to put that? Perhaps just on my desktop. How about that? Didn't think of that, did you? Desktop, that perfect. Stitch dress. Save. Just stitch dress. No. Desktop there, stitch dress. Save. Perfect. Downloading.
Less swanky than you'd think, Tracy. It's more trouble than it's worth having multiple PCs.
I couldn't agree more. It's good, and I think we're also getting to a point in which, and it's still working on it, we're getting to a point where we expect one PC to do everything for us, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's a great idea to have multiple PCs doing multiple things. Like you have one guy doing the heavy lifting for 3D, and maybe you have another one to do some video rendering, and you have another one to do emails or something like that. I think that is how I use my multiple machines.
Mm-hmm.
Has he done it? Yes, he has. Perfect. Stitch dress is here. Let me go and extract that. Into a folder called Stitch Dress. And there we have it. What I don't have is the OBJ.
Did I not send the OBJ?
It's not
sure
it's not.
I'm sure.
Send it just a secondary OBJ. It happens, doesn't it?
I think I stitched it the first time and then failed miserably to do anything else. I think they should be there. They're quite small.
I can't see it in the zip. Did you send it again?
Well, they won't be in the file. I'd have to send them again.
Oh, there it is. You got it. Duh. All right. So
I can't make them magically appear in a zip file I've already sent to you.
Why not, John? Explain. Why not?
Because that's not how computers work. I know they appear to be magic, but they're not really.
I've seen the Steve Jobs presentation once. That was like many, many years ago. Well, he gave it many years ago. I haven't seen it all that long ago. And when he was introducing like the early Apple computers, he said computers are extremely stupid, but they're extremely fast, and that's what makes them appear as if they're total magic. And I thought, you know what, that's why we think of them as amazing machines. So there we go. That's the dress. Got it in here. This is great. I mean, you're in the UK. I'm over in Florida, and we just, talk and casually spend time with one another as if we're in the same office.
It's magic, cool? Isn't it?
Isn't that cool? I love it. And we can take you all for the ride. Isn't this cool?
One day,
we're all on this ride together.
We may play Elden Ring together.
I love it.
Travel the lands between.
Travel the lands between. I'm looking forward to it. So I'm just going to go and drag these puppies in here into my surfaces tab. So I'll move this over here with my dress selected. I believe I have 2 material zones. Yes, I have. So I'm going to set up one first. So this is just the surface selection tool. I'm just going to select this, go onto the surfaces tab and select, just grab this one out. I'll go do the base material first. We decided there's no, we don't have the metalness map, do we? We don't have a metallic map.
No.
So under base, I'll just go over here and is this the correct one? This is the correct one. So I'm going to use the gray one first. Base goes into base. That's that. Yes. See the detail? See the detail? Now I can see my stitches as well. So that's a good start. We have a bit of normal that happens here in the bump channel.
Not the bump channel, sure. Oh yes, in the bump
it's kind
section.
of the bump section as such. So these are the ones with the stitches. So I'm going to have to go and grab. Just checking which one the correct one is. This one here. Pop that into here. We believe, and we can change the strength of that a little later. Then we have the opacity. what's happening under here.
Yeah, there's no opacity on the leather one.
There isn't, is there? So I'll leave that out.
Yeah, you just need the roughness map in the, yeah.
It's glossy refraction, not refraction, reflection. There's the glossy roughness channel. That's the one. That's this one, goes in here. And then we need to switch that on as well so that it does. There we go. Shininess has gone away. And is that it?
Yeah.
We need to set up the second material. Same thing, not diffuse, base. Yes, base diffuse, yes. So then this red goes into here. There it is. Then we have the one with the stitches. I think that's this one. Magicness, okay. That's that. Then we have, this one has opacity, doesn't it? I think a little bit.
Yeah.
Opacity, that goes into cut out opacity. There we go. Yeah, look at that. We can see it. And then we have a bit of roughness. So that's under glossy reflection. Roughness. And by all means, if you do have any questions about any of these things, please let us know. We're totally going to talk about this.
Yeah, is there an easier way to do it?
Well, there is a product by Riversoft Art. You could look into that. I think Chris and I have looked into it, and it's probably useful if you're setting up a lot of these things. So it is a substance kind of wizard in a way, and it makes it a little bit easier to export OBJs for texturing in Substance Painter and then to get them out. I'm not sure if it helps with the Marvelous Designer integration, but it certainly helps if you have an object from Daz Studio, you want to put it into Substance Painter, texture it, and then bring over the textures for like hundreds of objects. So that might be helpful, because I know that you and Mike do that quite a bit. So,
we do a lot, yeah. Map Master Pro, that sounds interesting.
Oh, Map Master Pro sounds interesting. What is that? I don't think I've ever heard of that. So I do see the stitches. They're perhaps not as what's the word, pronounced, clear also. That's something we can play with. I have a feeling maybe we need to set up the map inside what's it called, inside Marvelous Designer, like the substance material. I like to see what happens if you set that to a higher than 1024 value on export. See if that's a difference.
No, I exported at 4096.
The map you did, but the material itself was set to 1024.
Oh, I see.
It's just something.
Well, I did set them to 2048 in the end.
Oh, did you? Oh, yeah. Well, okay, we did.
Yeah, but yeah, 4096 might have been better, but that wouldn't have changed the stitches, I don't think.
Good point.
Yeah, and while close up they're not the best, you're never going to see it that close.
That's exactly right. It is one of those things you will either make a portrait and you'd see something like this, or you'd do a full body shot and you'd see something like that. Let me just actually put a little person in a second. Oh, actually, one other thing. What happens, just out of total curiosity, if we go ahead to the normal map and we remove the little limits here? So 1 is 1, but if we take the limits off and we crank that up, just out of curiosity, what happens if we put in 10? Then do we see? Yeah, we see a change in the leather, but the stitches aren't more or less. So that's interesting to see.
Yeah, that's odd. I don't know if the stitch normal is just so overblown it just doesn't understand it.
It's possible. You could also, I mean, this is another thing, just something to try. If you send me the two roughness maps, the height maps that you got out, maybe if I just pop them into the bump channel, we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
I love experimenting like that. While you do that, let me just go and literally just within 2 seconds put in the Genesis figure and run transfer utility through this. So we basically have a posable version of this. Also very, very cool.
Let's hope we made it short enough that it doesn't mess the skirt up too much.
We'll have a look. I will use the just the base 8.1 female, maybe? Yeah, 8.1. Treat yourself. It's all my fault for making it 50%. I had a feeling that might come back to haunt me. Good point, Brian. Oh, Jeff, what was I thinking? Good point. Let me just quickly get rid of that and bring in my stream safe text.
Oh, you need one of your, yeah.
Of course. Is it actually, has he been loaded? Is it still working? People are still working on things behind the scenes. Yeah, let me actually go take her out. Or in fact, just apply that. It's good. You come back. You come back, sweetie. We'll search for stream safe textures. There it is under materials. I'll just apply the tanned modesty. There we go. That should do the trick.
I think actually,
Ta-da.
you know, the important bits are mostly hidden, but better to be safe than sorry, I suppose.
just in case, yes. So just before I have the maps in place, if I head over to assets over here, transfer utility, and just
you're on the Genesis female.
Doing any masterpieces here, but we just do this. Target is our stitch dress, and projection template. I think we can probably use knee-length dress for this. Parent fit to no smoothing modifier will be okay. Boom. And now our dress is fitted. And if I go and do any posing with my girl, our dress is posing with her. If we add a smoothing modifier, those pokes will go away as well.
Yeah.
So hey,
if you add a dynamic modifier, the skirt will work.
Right, good point. for another lesson.
Another day, perhaps.
So let's have a look. If I go and bring in that height map, appears on our secretive chat thing here. I love that. Height diffuse. There we go.
It's not that secret. You're showing it on screen.
It's not a secret anymore, is it?
It's extremely unsecret.
Yes, Christina, they are. This is something I've created just for this purpose of when you need to show something on screen and you don't want to scare the children. So this is what they look like, and I've included materials for Genesis 3 and 8 and 8.1, and they come in 4 different color options, or like skin color options. There is actually a video that I've asked them to embed in the store page, but they didn't do that, so it's on my channel somewhere.
Is that one of your products then?
It's actually my only product, yes, on the Daz store, that is. So if we go and grab like this and say that would be under bump, and I'll just use the base bump for, actually that's on here now, isn't it? Let me go and put these into my stitch dress product here. No, not product, but the thing. And that's this base bump. Let's see, give it a value as well. 0 might not be the correct value. Let's start with 1 and see if, oh yeah, there we go. That's certainly starting to come out.
Yeah.
If I crank that up, yes. Oh, there we go.
If you turn the normal, we don't want to turn the normal map off, do we?
We can temporarily, just so that we see what comes from what. So this is what we get from the normal.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go. It's, it's nice to combine it with the normal.
And then just add that. I mean, this is what base bump is often the channel that people don't tend to use. So I like the idea. So what I love about this is that we can circumvent Substance Painter with that altogether. So if you don't have Substance Painter, don't worry about it. You can literally go and make as much or as little as you want in here. Like if I put it to 50, maybe that's going to be, there's a limit, isn't there? 50 is too much.
You're independent now. We can adjust the cloth detail independent of the stitch detail, which is nice.
Let's add it on the other material as well. And just because I'm a curious fella, I'm also going to try to do this in the displacement channel in a second, just because we can.
Just because we can.
Just because we can. So this here is then the other one. Like so. Give it a little value. Try 5. So the difference between the bump map and the displacement map is that, or basically between the bump and the normal versus the displacement, is that even if we imagine we see 3D detail in here, we would not see it on the edge of the figure. So if we were to apply this same map here into the displacement channel, the actual geometry would change. So if you look at the outside, it'll kind of, if you make it strong enough, it'll kind of pop out. It can, sometimes it looks good, sometimes it does not.
Well, Calvin's making a good point. Because the zero on displacement here is mid-grey, the leather or the fabric is going to displace inwards,
right,
and the things will displace outwards, so it might be a little bit weird.
We'll try it out. We'll see. This is one of those things you got to really experiment with this, and see how that goes. There it is. So that goes into here, and then we give it a value. Like I'll try something large so that we might get, like you predicted, It's a little odd.
A little much.
So 1 is basically the value that worked. I think 2 was already too insane. So 1, and then you can play with these values as well. So it's subdivision.
Which cloth edge is that? This Scania. There's a cloth edge that looks horrible somewhere.
Could be this one here. Is that the one you're talking about?
I don't know.
Jeff blames the water. I'm so sorry that I have still not exported water to France.
I want some too. We're not allowed to use hose pipes anymore.
You're not?
It's terrible.
Oh, no. I heard, like, back when I was living in London, we already had, in the summer, there was major shortages about you're not allowed to wash your car with a hose pipe anymore, so you have to use a bucket or
the garden,
gardens,
paddling pools or anything.
Bloody swimming pools and stuff. The neckline, okay.
It's quite possible the neckline doesn't look terrific.
There's also the geometry. I mean, if you add a subdivision surface modifier to this, it'll be smoother. So yeah, we didn't, and we can use the trick that John was showing us with the invisible pattern piece that could go on the top.
Yeah.
So let's just try the geometry converter sub D. And then we have a smoother edge here. Then we can, to top it all off, you'd probably go and edit object, geometry, add smoothing modifier to this as well. And then
Christina, yes, you could do that. Add them as a geo shell from Substance Painter. In Substance, in a few minutes, I suspect, I'm going to show you how the stitching works in Substance, so that you have to do it in Marvelous Design. You can do it in Substance, and you'll get a similar result.
Christina, I absolutely agree with John. There's a stream I did a few weeks ago, I think maybe a month ago, the public Daz stream, in which I showed how to do some face painting in Substance Painter. And in order to display that on the Genesis figure, that's where I used geoshells. So the same principle would exactly apply to stitches. If you add a geoshell to your object and then just use the stitches, have that opacity map that only the stitches are visible on that map, that's a great idea actually, to have a completely separate shader for your stitches. That's good thinking. I never even thought about this. Good
In fact,
idea.
you could add stitches to Genesis if you want.
Then
Turn
you
her
can make
into
Frankenstein.
a Frankenstein zombie. Yeah.
And that's how you got the idea. Perfect. Well, so this, I like the idea. This is how we do it in principle. I love it. I'm going to go experiment with this because this is new to me. Exporting the height map and using that independently in Daz Studio. Thank you for showing that, John. I appreciate that.
And Tracy, there is a way of getting thickness from Marvelous Designer. The problem is when you export with thickness, it doesn't weld your mesh together. So you get a front of your mesh and a back of your mesh, and you get an intermediate joining, and none of it's welded together.
Right.
So the difficulty then comes is when you start setting it up for conforming clothing, or even dynamic clothing. Those splits have a tendency to manifest themselves because, if they're in slightly the wrong place for, a join, you'll see your clothes start to split apart. If you're starting to morph your clothes, then those splits are going to make it difficult because, you tend to get splits where the edges aren't welded. Now, you can potentially take your thick mesh into Blender or something and get it to weld everything up, but it's very time consuming. There are ways of faking edges. For example, some things I've done is I put a strip over an edge, over a seam, like a shoulder edge, and then I'll sew it to the underlying thing. So I just get that thickness at the edge, and that can work. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky, but it tends to work. But the thing that I was sort of demonstrating earlier, if you were here, was adding a little strip to the outside of a seam, a cloth edge.
Yes, you were.
And getting it to add the normal map in there, which will give you a little bit of a fake edge to make it look a bit nicer.
John, would you like to switch over back to your computer? We'll have a look at the substantial
We'll look at
painter.
substance, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay,
Let's see if I can figure out the correct button. Yeah, look at that. Take this out, then I go and I do that. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going File New. We'll get a new project going. And I've got my little poof here, which is, I believe, what they're called.
The poof. Oh, I'd love to see how you. I mean, you showed me how to make that, but this is something. Maybe we can do that next time. It's just such a cool, cute little thing to make in Marvelous Design. It takes 5 minutes and looks super cool.
So I'm just going to turn the UV tile off because this has just got a single zone on it. And 2048 dock resolution, that should be okay to work with. And I'll get rid of that. There we go. Okay, so there's our little poof kind of piece. And if I go into the 2D, 3D view, you can see that's my UV map. So you can't see it at the moment, but there's like sections between, there's 4 sections around, and I've got a section on top and a section on bottom. So if I want to texture this, I might go to my directory here and say pick on one of my leathers. I'll say one of mine. They're not mine. They're just the default ones in general.
The chainmail looked great. I'm gonna try that later.
The what?
The chainmail. It just came up. That looked really nice and spiky.
Yeah, you'd have to get it off me first. That's one I made. There's a video for it on the.
Oh, you made that. I had kind of assumed
Yeah.
you grabbed that from the Substance repository, but no, you made that. Of course,
No,
made
I
that
made
yourself.
that
Cool.
If you want it, I'll just send it to you. I'll make it available in the Ko-fi store or something.
Great idea.
Okay, so there we have our poof, and I've popped some fairly default leather on. Let's just make that a bit finer. And I'm going to put a layer above this, and I'm going to turn color off. In fact, I'm going to turn everything off except for height and roughness. So roughness for now, I'm going to just turn right up, and I'm going to give it a little bit of height. Now, if I add a black mask to this, that will turn all that effect off. And then to that black mask, I'll add a generator. When I click into the generator, there's something called auto stitch. And if I apply that, it will apply the default stitch to our piece, which doesn't look particularly terrific to start with, but we can adjust it. First of all, I auto bake my maps. So
that's a good
bake our
start.
maps. Where's the bake tool? It's here. So I'll just bake all at default currently.
Maybe higher than 512.
Don't need thickness. Yes, I do need higher than 512. I'm going to go 4096 because that's where I'm going to end up being.
Treat ourselves. It's a small piece. It's going to be okay.
It's only one map. It shouldn't kill me. I can't hear my PC complaining about it just yet. So there we go. So if I look at the generator, we can see at the bottom it can use the curvature map. So up here we have some types. The default type is UV. So what it's doing is for each of the UVs, it's using that as a template to put our stitches on. And we can change our position to move it closer to the edges. We can change our stitch size, make them smaller or larger.
So
and the width.
The UV outlines is essentially where it gets the information from where to put the stitches.
Yeah. Adjust our length and the roundness. And the nice thing you can do here that you can't do in MD is add some jitter to it. So the jitter will basically put a little bit of variation between our stitches, so that you get a hand stitch line instead of, like a machine stitch line.
So it's not the absolute perfect, super straight thing that looks almost replicated. There's a little, variation in there as such.
So with that said, we can see that we've got some stitches here, and now I'm going to completely ruin it by switching this over to a curvature mask. So the curvature mask uses the curvature in your model, and it may not be suitable. I don't think my curvature map is really suitable because nothing's coming up. You basically need quite a sharp object for this, because what it's looking for is where the curvature is very sharp between 2 points. So it shows up very white. And so if
your object is soft, I suppose that's why it can't find.
Yeah, it's a bit on the softy side. So if I go into my curvature, you'll see my actual curvature map is pretty much uniform grey. Whereas what it's looking for is white features that it can pick out and then use. So it's an option. The other option is we can use a custom input. And the custom input opens up an input down here, and this is where you can use a black and white map to tell it where you want the stitches. So you could take your map into Photoshop, for example, and draw a beautiful design on it for some embroidery or
follow all those paths that we can't follow in Substance Painter currently. So you can be literally creative with that and draw where you want the stitches to be, load that in there. Nice one.
And just to sort of demonstrate that it does actually work, I'm going to pop my brick texture into this custom input.
Good idea, good idea.
And then switch this over to my material, and you'll see I've got, stitches along the paths. Not actually along the all the white bits, for example, but it's it's using that as a guide, the difference between the two zones. So we can change our path position here, so I can squeeze that up.
So this is a kind of a puzzle I always had, that I like the auto stitch generator, and if your UVs are set up in a way that your stitches would make sense, that's all perfect. But what if that's not the case? I was always thinking it's a little hard to predict. Like if I wanted to use these features but provide a custom kind of path or whatnot. That's cool though. I can take the UV map as a guide into Photoshop, and maybe on my square pieces I could make diagonal, just black and white diagonal piece, and the auto stitch generator would follow those.
Yes.
Sweet.
Now, this is, how can I put it? It's not the ideal image to do it from. You can see that it's putting it on there, but we've got lots of seams and such like. The problem is we don't really have a UV projection option here. If we did, we could say project it, with a triplanar projection. But we still have down here some options for our things. So we could invert the map, for example, which makes no difference in this particular case. We can change the hardness of our bricks and the bevel, which is going to make a difference to us.
Oh, there we go. That makes a difference.
Bevel X and Y. So,
Sweet.
it's basically, it's an image, but it's a dynamic image. It's a procedural image, which you can update and change, and,
this particular one, you can different images you bring in from the asset library there, they have different options. It's a bit like different substance parameters. Materials. But you can provide...
We've got this circles one, for example. Let's pop that in and see what that looks like. Oh, I've got some lovely circles. And we can increase the tiling, and then we'll have lots of little dots.
Oh, yeah, there we go. I got to say, I really like the one that you had in the beginning, where you weren't using such a map, where you just had like this one exactly, where you just had regular stitches. And you give that a funky material.
This is ideal when your UV is correct. I say correct, that's the wrong word to use. When your UV is suitable for it. As I said earlier, I like the MD UVs for this sort of thing, because basically the pattern is the edge. The pattern is the flat version of the garment. It's not like a projection. We started with that shape and we ended up with a 3D shape. Unlike when you're unwrapping a 3D shape, you start with a 3D shape and hopefully end up with a readable 2D shape.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
So it's kind of it's interesting to maybe we can do that in the next time. Like basically take the same dress, or actually you can do this at home if you have both Substance Painter and Marvelous Designer. Take John's starter dress and not make stitches in Marvelous Designer. Just take the dress into Substance Painter and use the auto stitch generator to let the UV map be the guide for the auto stitch generator. So it's another possibility. I might do that and just put it up on my ArtStation page, like this is from here, this is from there.
This is how you do it. The only thing with and this is why I said earlier that I'd prefer to do it in Marvelous Designer, is Marvelous Designer I can decide which edge to put it on.
True.
Whereas here, it's going to put it on all of the edges.
So I suppose then, if you wanted to get rid of some of these, you could always add a paint layer to the map.
Yeah. What you do is you add a paint layer to your
to the mask.
To your mask, and then if I find the mask channel,
here it is.
So this is my paint layer. So I want to remove some stitches.
Switch to black.
I just take them out.
That is awesome. This is the kind of fine control that I appreciate. You let it, even if the auto stitch generator does too much, perfect, let it, and then you take out, mask off what you don't want, even to a point of that, right? So that you basically say, I just want that stitch to just start there.
Yeah, or you might say, okay, well, I don't want this to be perfect. Just
worn off, whatever.
Break it up some. It's lost some stitches.
Sometimes it's what I really appreciate about you, John, is that you look into you look into how is this made, why does this work, and then basically you break it down into something that's extremely simple, and when you then change something there, it actually makes way more sense.
I try.
It's really nice. No, I appreciate your time and your effort in explaining these things to us in such detail.
The last little bit I just wanted to show there, I've just turned the colour on for these stitches. So now they're not just taking on the color underneath.
They have a color of their own.
Yeah.
Do you know, why don't you put this up as a little freebie on your Ko-fi store? That'd be really cool. I'd love to have that.
Oh, sure.
So this is one of those things that that's just this beautiful. You can have a Genesis figure sitting on there. You can try to use the smoothing modifier to make a little indentation, or you can take it in as a sculpting program, make a little indent on there.
Oh, sorry. Let me just show, because this will take you about 2 seconds.
I like it.
If I add a fill layer in here, I only want the height, so Alt-click height, and I want the negative height.
Oh yeah, to make it go in.
Yeah. Now I can add a black mask, and I can add a generator, and this one I want the UV border generator.
Oh, something else I didn't know that existed. UV border generator.
Now, if I go to the mask, you can see what's happening, and it's just a question of adjusting. Yeah.
Dang,
take that down.
Ha! No way.
Yeah. So you can really get it fine. We can smooth it a little bit. Smoothing's a little bit, twitchy, but it can be done. I tend not to. And the reason I tend not to is if I switch back to the mask again, you'll see that if I smooth this, it comes away from the edge.
Yes, indeed.
So you see when I smooth it a little bit, I get this split in there. And that's because there's nothing on outside. If it was completely white outside, it would be perfect, but it isn't. So it's not the best. But you can adjust this so we can increase the balance. We can tighten it up by increasing the contrast.
He is, isn't he, Tracy? I agree.
We can even change the distance. So yeah, you can really mess with it. And as I showed earlier, when you export, whoops, that's not what I wanted. When you export, you can, it will just convert the height to a normal. Yeah. So you don't have to have the, like a displacement map. You can just have the normal, and it will give you a nice little normal. That looks all right from that distance.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, if I switch over to the old render.
Oh yeah, come on. Iray render inside Substance Painter. Who doesn't like that?
As you know, the Gdansk shipyard is best.
It is actually. It looks great.
Yeah, it looks great, and I don't know why. It's just perfect. And that's that's what we got. We can see we can see a bit of stitch. We've got some nice indented seam bits. Yeah, nice.
Phenomenal. Yes, I'd love to see that on your Ko-fi store, and just also while you're at it, buy him a coffee and say thank you for this wonderful stream. I really appreciate that. John, thank you so much for your time and for showing us this. Really appreciate that.
Have I overdone it?
I don't think you have. No, I think we're all kind of speechless to see features that we didn't even know existed. Can I bring you back like so? I think that'll work. That'll work. No,
so I'm just laughing at Jeff's brain. Been stitched up apparently.
Been stitched up. So cool. It was
the stitch brushes in Painter. Yes. They're, yeah.
Shall we have a quick look?
That bit.
Shall we have a quick look?
Yeah.
Why don't we?
So the stitch brushes in Painter are terrific. I'm going to use.
They are. I can vouch for that. These are the only brushes I was familiar with when I started making stitches in Substance Painter. That's the only thing I knew. I didn't know there was a stitch generator as such.
So if I go to the brushes and type in stitch, it should give me my options. So we've got quite a few options. We have ones from simple kind of roller stitches here. So if I paint there, whoops, not it round, we get our stitches. It's not too bad. I need to adjust my settings for this. I need some height. Let's have some roughness and stitch away. There we go. That's some nice little stitches. The reason I don't use it personally is because I'm lazy. And the stitch generator will do a job which is 95% close to what I want. The ones that aren't 95% close to what I want are these. this Stitches complex with the little dynamic orange kind of icons.
What does that actually mean? Those are not particle brushes, are they? They are, what are they? The orange?
They're not, they're dynamic.
Dynamic, okay.
Yeah. So if I paint with that, you get a lovely stitch with a raised edge, which is absolutely amazing. And that's painted directly on the normal. If you want to paint in a lovely straight line, click once at one end, don't move your mouse, press shift, and then move your mouse. And then you can paint in a lovely straight line. And providing you have the patience to do that across your entire model, you know, it's brilliant. And actually, I was messing about, Jay and I were messing about with this the other day. So I'm just going to get rid of this and meet Matt up.
Oh yes, Matt, I'm glad you saved him.
Yeah, I didn't save him.
Oh, you didn't save what we did? Okay, no worries.
So I'm just going to hide those. And what we were doing was just messing about with these stitch brushes. So, you know, we made him kind of a Frankenstein kind of stitched together. Oops, helps if I'm on the right brush. There we go. Sort of like a stitched together Frankenstein's
little teddy bear guy.
Little teddy bear guy. Yeah,
it's very cute.
Just by kind of stitching him, or not even stitching, cutting him up and stitching him back together again.
It looks so cute, especially if you can do some with symmetry and you do some without symmetry, and then you've got this little patchwork doll.
And, you know, we're away.
I totally agree with Bohemian. The one thing that I find is sorely missing from Substance Painter as for these types of things is make a path and let the brush stroke the path. This is like this thing we've had for ages in Photoshop, and it's just not in Substance Painter. It's a shame, really, because that would be superb if they'd add that.
But as I demonstrated earlier in the week, 3D Coat does have that option.
True.
It has quite an extensive path set of tools whereby you can define your path, you can adjust your points around, you can line them up, you can it has equalize buttons and all sorts of things, and subdivide buttons. And then the very last thing you do is you press the button and it runs your current brush along the path you've defined. And it you know, as far as I know, you can't do that in very many other programs.
This is the exact feature we're looking for inside Substance Painter. Maybe at one point, eh?
Oh yeah, if Substance had it, we'd be laughing.
One day, version 9.
One day.
Hey, thank you so much for Blender has it as well, the stroke path option. Christina, that is news to me. I've got to look into that. Thank you so much for being here, John. I really appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
I hope you can be back one day. It's wonderful to get your tips. If you want to know more about Marvelous Designer, about Substance Painter, check out John's YouTube channel. You already know what he can do with the myriads of products that you've already been buying for the last 20 years. And it's wonderful to meet the man behind it.
That's not just me.
It's not just me. It's always a team effort, isn't it? Hey, thank you so much. Have a wonderful Saturday. We'll be back with the public Daz stream, I believe, in 2 weeks' time, where we might have a surprise. I can't really be too specific about it, but we may have to. We may have one for you. Until such time, thanks for being here. Have a wonderful Saturday. I'll see you very soon. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Take care.